Hello, good afternoon, Mexico. Good morning, Friday morning in New Zealand. Please, as always, we would like you to keep your phones on mute. If you have any questions, please make them in the chat box, and then we will be monitoring those questions to ask them later at the end of the presentation. And as always, this session will be recorded for uploading into our YouTube channel. That is Lawit Group. That's the name of the YouTube channel where you can see all the webinars that have been presented and are recorded there. So with this, we will get started now. And let me present you my brother, Juan Carlos, who is the CEO of Lawit Group. I'm Alex. And Juan Carlos, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good morning, Simon and our friends from New Zealand, and good afternoon in Mexico. It's a pleasure to be here with you with such a special event with Simon. Let me tell you, just for those that who may not know us, let me just tell you in a few seconds basically what we are. Lawit is the legal tech and legal innovation arm of the law firm Logistic. And basically what we do in Lawit is we provide consulting, technology, and services to law departments and law firms, offering practical ways to improve efficiency, quality, and business outcomes. And Logistic powers these events and these type of webinars to make them happen and to coordinate on legal topics.
And as we all know, we're facing a moment of unprecedented uncertainty, but we would rather see it as an opportunity. And it is crucial to rapidly learn the tools, concepts, and frameworks that enable us to understand and shape the future of law. A lot of these ideas have been in the cook room for months or years, and now we were pushed into the swimming pool. So now it's time that we need to implement all of these at an urgent pace. So for these, Juan Carlos, you want to explain them why we made this Lawit 8?
Yes, we basically started a month ago putting together and organizing these webinars to share relevant content dealing with the business of law and legal technology. We always aim at getting, the leaders of the legal industry wherever they are, and now we have one coming from the other side of the world, which is a pleasure to have Simon TUPMAN with us. And again, the idea for this is to ensure practical and high impact presentations show the value of the experience and insight of experts that join us.
Today's talk is called It's a Small World, and it's going to be about lessons learned for lawyers. And Simon is going to share what's happening on the other side of the world from Mexico. Simon TUPMAN, who is our speaker today, he's an international business mentor and consultant to law firms. And Simon is located in New Zealand. He's a business speaker, author, and mentor to law firms globally, a former practicing lawyer in the UK, and he has been called on by clients in 13 countries over a 25-year career. He's the author of 3 books, including the groundbreaking Why Lawyers Should Eat Bananas, and hopefully he'll give us a little insight of what that means. And he's also a member of the Law Consultancy Network, and his webpage is www.simontupman.com. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see Simon and begin his talk. At the end of the presentation, we're going to do Q&A, and then we're going to finish with some future events upcoming next week. So, Simon, you have the screen, you have the microphone, so we're going to put ourselves in mute, and then you take on.
Great, I hope you can all hear me, and Good morning, those people who are joining us from Australasia, New Zealand and Australia. Buenos tardes, those people in North America and Mexico. Thank you very much for the invitation to be with you and to have this discussion today about lessons learned for lawyers from this neck of the woods. I've got about half an hour to chat with you before we open this up for questions today. And I thought what I would do is to share with you some observations that I've made about the legal services sector, not just as a result of COVID, but I want to talk to you briefly about trends that were impacting on the legal services sector pre-COVID, how firms have adjusted and reacted as a result of COVID, and consequently, the third part of this discussion is looking at some of the challenges that lie ahead for law firm leaders as a result of the trends and as a result of COVID as well. Now, if I may, to begin, I will add a little bit of context to my comments. And thank you, Alex, for that introduction. I started my career years ago, probably more than 30 years ago, as a litigation lawyer in London. I'm not a practicing lawyer. I haven't practiced law now for nearly 30 years. I'm not an economist. I'm not an IT specialist. And I'm not really a forecaster or a predictor either. But I am a big supporter of the legal services sector and the value that lawyers and legal professionals contribute to society, to businesses, to families, and to individuals as well. And I really liked your opening slide there, Alex, in which you said this is a time of unprecedented, not just uncertainty, but also opportunity as well, because I think there is a massive opportunity here for lawyers and legal organizations who are looking to design a better future for themselves, for their people, and for their communities as well. And I will share some of my thoughts about that in a little bit more detail coming up. But perhaps the other thing I need to say too, you kindly mentioned the book that I wrote. It was actually 20 years ago now, called Why Lawyers Should Eat Bananas. Why should they eat bananas? It was very simple. It was a slightly tenuous explanation, but it was the title of the book, and one of my mentors at the time had said it's helpful to have a title that's a little bit unusual. But secondly, and the main reason why lawyers should eat bananas is that lawyers are, or should be to some extent, like bananas. In other words, good for the people who take or use them, and also good value for money. A little bit tenuous, but there we are. I understand in Mexico there is a slightly different appreciation of the similarities between lawyers and bananas, but we won't go there today. Anyway, if I may, let me begin this conversation by winding the clock back pre-COVID and just looking at what some of the trends were that were impacting or have been impacting on legal organizations and law firms here in Australasia. And I think some of those trends are very much a mirror of what's been taking place on a global basis as well. But one of the comments I want to make is that since really the start of this decade, or even the start of this century, it's been my experience through the observations I've made that business is fundamentally shifting in the way it does business. And what I mean by that is that in the past, business has been very much focused on sustainability as narrowly defined by making a profit. And I think that, you know, the main driver for business has been to ensure that at whatever costs, businesses do make a profit. Now, we all know that that is essential to staying in business, but I'm reminded of the words of the Professor Peter Drucker, the late professor there, management guru from the 70s and 80s, who reminds us even today, and I think very pertinently, that profit for a business is like oxygen to a human being. It's essential for our existence, and if you don't have it, you're out of the game. But if you think that your sole purpose in life is about breathing, then you're missing out on something. And I think the saying is very pertinent for business and indeed for law firms, which are businesses, and that is if you like, that's on the strategic platter for law firms has broadened in recent years, so that there is more of a focus on sustainability, on the interests of the people, on the interests of their community, while at the same time fulfilling their responsibilities and making a profit. So those sort of changes have been taking place, I think, brewing for the last 20, 25 years. And I'm often inspired by the words of John Elkington, the man who developed the phrase, the triple bottom line, who in his book, The Breakthrough Challenge, in 2014, which he co-wrote with Jochen Zeitz, said, as confidence in the old world order erodes, those with the eye to the future are looking for radically different solutions. In the process, a growing number of business leaders are starting to consider new ways to perform not only against today's measure of success, but tomorrow's bottom line. And I think those words are prescient in many ways, not only for business leaders, but also for lawyers as well. It's been my experience that many lawyers and indeed law firm leaders have become somewhat disillusioned with the old business models, the old way of working, and have been under a number of pressures to actually transform and change the way that they operate. And I would sum up those pressures or challenges by reversing or talking about what I call the 3 C's. And I think one which is very relevant for Lawit is computerization. And we all know that, of course, that technology has come along, and it is a great facilitator and enabler, not just a disruptor of the delivery of legal services, or indeed any services worldwide for that matter. But indeed, computerization, digitization of tasks to assist in the delivery of legal services is playing a very large part. And of course, you know, you could turn around and say how many partners or directors in your legal services organization were using this facility, Zoom, just a few weeks ago. So I think a lot of lawyers have actually gone up quite a learning curve only in the past couple of months in coming to grips with communication tools such as Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Jabber or Slack or any of the other apps that may be out there to facilitate better communication with people. So that is just one example, of course. Artificial intelligence, of course, is making a big difference. And of course, as Richard Susskind, the renowned author of Tomorrow's Lawyers and the Future of the Professions, which he authored with his son Daniel, would suggest that many professions, and law included, are of course going to be transformed in the future by the increasing applicability of artificial intelligence. So that has been one pressure for many lawyers and law firm leaders who are used to the traditional way of working. The second C that I like to refer to, of course, is competition. And that was a dirty word when I trained as a lawyer, but less so these days, because of course we all know that clients do have a choice, an increasing choice these days in terms of where they shop around for legal services, whether it's online or whether it's in person. And so the implication of that, of course, has been for law firms to raise the bar, raise their own standards, and focus increasingly on the needs and requirements of their clients and their varied clientele. It's just not competition either for legal services, but also competition for people, good people to join their organizations, be they lawyers or other legal professionals with qualifications in business development, IT, administration, management, financial management, and so on. So the word competition is used here in the broadest possible sense. I think the third C, which has brought about pressure for law firm leaders leading up to COVID in the past few years, is the issue of compliance, at least certainly here in New Zealand, where anti-money laundering regulations were introduced just a couple of years ago. And I know that many CEOs and practice managers of law firms have devoted many, many hours to ensure that their firms are fully compliant with the new regulations. So when you put all of those into the pot and stir them around, it basically means that running a legal business these days is becoming more intense, more challenging, and therefore, as a result of that, for some lawyers, it's all change, and a lot of them may not like the new environment in which they're operating. They tend to be people, in my view, who are over 50, who've been used to working in a certain way and have difficulty in adapting to certain changes in their work environment. I think what we've also seen as well is an increasing disengagement in business. and an eroding degree of trust in our institutions, and to some extent, not only our governments, but also our business leaders as well. And this, I think, has bred a degree of dissatisfaction amongst people who go to work every single day, and that has been another challenge, I think, for leaders of businesses, particularly law firm leaders, is to ensure that their people are engaged. In other words, they enjoy coming to work, they're focused, they understand why they're doing it, not just being skilled at how they go about doing their tasks. So add that to the mix as well, and it's all mixed for quite an interesting cocktail going forward. So those have been some of the trends leading up to this year, and indeed in previous years I've been encouraging firms to embrace those trends rather than to be frightened of them, and to understand that there is a difference between running a good firm of lawyers and running a good legal business. I think it was Stephen Mason, the professor in the UK, who, when advising the British government in the early part of this century, made comment about the distinction between the legal profession and the legal services sector, saying that they're not one and the same, and that the legal profession may die in the future, whereas the legal services sector may thrive in the future. And I think it's fair to say that when we look at the figures, the percentage of lawyers making up the legal services industry at the moment is around, I believe, a quarter. So there are obviously many personnel who contribute their time and effort to making sure that legal services are delivered in today's environment, and many of those people are not actually lawyers. So my message is not just for lawyers, of whom are tuned in today, but also for the non-lawyers as well. So let's wind the clock forward, or back in as from today, to early February or early March, depending on where in the world you were. But in mid-March here in New Zealand, all of a sudden we went into what they call lockdown, and the government introduced restrictions about where we could go, who we could mix with. Effectively, all businesses were shut and have remained in a stage of lockdown for a period of about 6 weeks to 2 months. During that time, I got on Zoom, much as we're doing today, to speak with a number of lawyers in Australia and in New Zealand, to provide a forum for them to exchange their views, their concerns, their thoughts, and so on. And that, coupled with other research that I looked at and learned from, painted a bit of a picture, and I'll share that picture with you, if I may, today. But I think it's fair to say that the principal challenge for a lot of those law firms was business continuity and business solvency. All of a sudden, of course, we find that law firms had to close the doors of their offices, that their teams were having to work from home. There was the challenge of communicating with colleagues and also with clients. There was also the challenge of cash flow as well. A lot of law firms I know in this part of the world were able to take advantage of a government wage subsidy. Some firms didn't take advantage of that because they were cash rich and they felt that it was not necessary for them to do so. But certainly the issue of cash was of immediate concern, and I think it still is of immediate concern for many firms going forward. Indeed, what I'm hearing from a lot of firms at the moment is that while receivables, in other words, cash coming into the firm for past invoices, has been pretty good, there is a concern that come next month and July going forward, that the pipeline might not be quite so robust, and that cash may be a lot tighter than it has been in the past few months. Indeed, that observation is supported by a recent piece of research conducted by the Australasian Law Practice Managers Association, the members survey, which concluded that, and this is a survey based on just under 100 firms, that they were reporting a decrease in demand for their services, which was also resulting in a decrease in the number of hours that their teams were working. In some cases, this also resulted in a decrease in salaries, a decrease in partner drawings and bonuses that are paid to staff members, and also an anticipated decrease in cash flow as well. So I think the message here for a lot of firms is to keep a very close eye on the ledger, the financial ledger. Cash is king at the moment. And as a result of that, it means that astute financial managers in law firms will be keeping a very close eye on their cost structure. I know that for some firms, they've had some rent relief from their landlords during this difficult period. It's also raised the question, I think, for a lot of law firm leaders, and that is to what extent are the bricks and mortar or the office space that they are currently renting necessary in the future? Because I think one of the experiences that a lot of law firms have had has been surprisingly positive from this lockdown period and this consequential slowdown. Apart from the initial anxieties and fears, I think what they've discovered is that their colleagues have responded exceptionally well to the challenges of working from home, from balancing parental responsibilities and family responsibilities with work responsibilities. In fact, I've had several people saying, I'm actually quite enjoying this, and I don't necessarily want to go back to the office. Some staff members do get a huge social kick from being with colleagues at the office, and other colleagues and staff members are quite concerned about going back to the office as a result of the ongoing risk or potential risk of infection from COVID as well. So summarizing those points, I would say that communication has been paramount in the minds of law firm leaders in this part of the world. Cash flow has been king for many firms, because without that, they'll be pulling the pin, and let's hope that doesn't happen. But research in the UK a couple of weeks ago from the Law Society, which was published in their Law Society Gazette, suggested that up to 8,000 high street law firms could go under as a result of the difficulties caused from COVID. And the third area, in summary, as a result of COVID, is the importance of making sure that colleagues are in good spirits, as well as being in good health, that collegiality continues, and that the job gets done. I think one of the other spin-offs too that I've been hearing from law firm leaders is that it has had the effect of opening people's minds and being more receptive to implementing changes because they've had to. There's been no choice as a result of COVID. In the past, I, as an outside advisor, mentor, consultant, might go into a firm and say, look, I think it's a really good idea if you consider doing these things, but for many of those firms, it's been an option. And so they say, yes, we like the idea, but we'll get round to doing it someday. But that day has come along. And as a result, COVID has really not given many choices for people to opt out of implementing new initiatives, many of which have been quite positive. I don't know if anyone tuned into a webcast that I hosted a few weeks ago with Canadian author and legal innovator Mitch Kowalski, but he described COVID as the burning platform, which basically brings about much needed change in certain areas of the legal services sector. And I know, and I hope you won't mind me sharing his views, but he believes it is important for law firm leaders not to resume or try to resume business as usual, but to embrace the changes that have taken place, pick the positives out of that, because in some cases there will be no going back to some of the bad habits that firms may have engaged in the past. So that is, I guess, very much a discussion of looking at the positives to flow from this rather than focusing on purely the negatives as well. So firms seem to be coming out of COVID reasonably well. Firms seem to be quite busy. I've heard one firm say that they're flat out at the moment. Some business areas or practice areas did decline in the past couple of months. I'm thinking property transactions, business transactions, they declined. Well, employment law was on the increase. Employment lawyers have been very busy. But I think we'll see a softening out, a gradual flattening out over the next couple of months as we get back to business as normal, at least many people hope so. So that brings us to today, and looking forward to the future. I said at the beginning of this discussion that I'm not a forecaster and I'm not a predictor either, but I would like to share with you some thoughts that I hope will be helpful for those of you listening to this webcast today in terms of what to do now, because I think COVID, coupled with the trends that have been shaping and forming in the previous years, have thrown down very much a challenge for law firm leaders and in-house counsel as well. And bearing in mind that in New Zealand, about 20 to 25%, I don't know the exact figure, it's about 24% of the legal profession is now made up of in-house counsel and general counsel. So this is obviously of impact to them as well. But many of my comments today have been focused on law firms. So I'll hope you'll forgive me for that. But my advice would be applicable both to in-house counsel and also to law firms today, and that is to embrace the leadership challenge that has been thrown up by recent events. Someone who was a mentor for me many years ago was a chap called W. Mitchell. He is an American who wrote a wonderful book, and the title of which is "It's Not What Happens to You, It's What You Do About It." And I think that auspicious title is good advice for all business leaders and all law firm leaders in today's environment. W. Mitchell was a man who suffered two major accidents in health. One was a cycle accident that left him with burns to 65% of his body. The other was an accident as a result of a light aircraft accident. It left him paralyzed from the waist down as well. So Mitchell certainly has had setbacks in life, and I'm always amazed by his positivity and his ability to turn a negative into a positive. And I think we can learn from the example of people like W. Mitchell as we face adversity and setbacks and say, well, what are we going to do about it? So to make this, I guess, simple or more accessible for listeners today, my thoughts going forward is that all law firm leaders should have courage, and that is an acronym, and I'll deal with each of the 7 letters individually, if I may. The C of courage stands for clarify, and what I mean by that is that this is an opportunity for all law firm leaders to clarify their proposition. In other words, this is what clients buy from us, and we must tailor our services to meet that particular need or requirement. This is an opportunity for us to clarify our policies, how we're governed as an organization, and what we believe in, and also an opportunity to clarify our protocols, many of which have been obviously disturbed and shaken up as a result of COVID in the past few weeks. I think this is an opportunity for law firm leaders to simplify their planning because, as they say, that the best laid plans of mice and men. In other words, any plan that you may have written at the beginning of this year for 2020 may well be down the girdler as a result of what's happened in the past few weeks. So we have an opportunity now to have a blank canvas and to start afresh. On my blog page on my website at simontupman.com, there is a one-page strategy which you can download. I think the listing was of 19th of February 2019, in which there are various boxes there which I think can be helpful for all law leaders going forward, saying, have we answered these questions? It's a simple method just to help you to clarify your proposition, your policies, and your protocols as well. The O stands for being open to new ideas and to change. Yes, these are times of uncertainty. It's also time for opportunity as well. So grasp the opportunity and be open to new ideas. And those new ideas may come from a number of stakeholders. They may be your colleagues, they may be your clients, they may be members of your community. They may be even your competitors. So keep an eye on what opportunities might well be opening up for you as a result of this period of transition. The U stands for understanding. Understanding the needs of your various stakeholders, in particular your clients and your colleagues. They would be at the top of the list, and really neither can exist without the other. So by understanding, it means really not just understanding what their legal needs might be, but also understanding what their emotional needs might be, their family needs, their business needs. And this is an opportunity, I think, for lawyers to really dig deep and ask questions on a broader basis about what are the buttons that really need pressing. You know, what is keeping people awake at night? It's an opportunity to build deep relationships and to really understand what makes people tick, be they their clients or their colleagues. The R is to resist the temptation to go back to old habits. You may want to open up the office again and say, well, let's just go back to business as normal. But as I've indicated earlier in this discussion, I think there are some drawbacks in doing that. And I think you risk also closing the door on potential opportunities in the future. So, you know, resist the temptation to agree with the naysayers and keep an open mind going forward. The A stands for ask questions. You know, I think people will be looking to leaders for clarity, because you know, these are uncertain times. But I think it's also an opportunity for leaders to ask people to involve them. And there are 3 questions that I think can be helpful for all the law firm leaders at this time. And these are questions that you can ask either your people or indeed your clients, or both. But firstly, what do we need to do as an organization to survive and thrive going forward? Secondly, what should we keep? What should we chuck? What should we change? And what should we add to the mix in our legal organization? And thirdly, how can we serve our clients even better than we have done in the past? And I think if you start with those 3 questions, you could be amazed at the sort of answers that you may get. Have an open mind, just be prepared to listen and see what people say, but there could be some nuggets of gold in some of the answers that you get back from people that you ask that question of. The G for courage is to be guided by the principles that have placed you where you are today. Resist the temptation, if you like, to make commercially expedient decisions that may be beneficial in the short term. I think it is important that amidst all of this, that trust is not eroded, trust in your organization, trust in you as the leaders. And I think that by observing the principles that guide your decision making and have done in the past, rely on those again to get you through this particular time. And I think if you do so, you will preserve the trust and the integrity that has earned you the reputation that you have done today. And while I talk about trust too, I think I'd just like to mention too, it may be helpful for listeners in this discussion today, a paper that I came across last year, which was called The Future of Trust, published by the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand and authored by Dr. Lisa Marriott, who is a professor of taxation and associate dean at Victoria University of Wellington Business School here in New Zealand. I thought it was a really excellent paper, and one which explores what happens when new technology meets old-fashioned values. And there was one aspect of her research that really stuck with me, and I will, if I can, just read you a brief paragraph from this report, in which she says, as technology plays an increasingly important role in the way we deliver services, businesses face new challenges in maintaining trusting relationships. Some say that the increased use of technology in business is damaging trust. However, our research suggests it's not the shift towards increased use of technology that is damaging trust. Instead, it is the accompanying move away from face-to-face contact. Traditional values of open behavior remain paramount in rapidly changing business environments. So I encourage you to take on board those comments and download the PDF of that report. It's The Future of Trust, published by the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand. Some really interesting points there. And indeed, in that report is a chart which looks at the most trusted businesses across a spectrum of about 12 to 15 businesses. At top of the list are doctors. Towards the bottom of the list of political parties. Surprise, surprise. Lawyers lie 7th in that list. So make of that what you will. The last letter of courage is E, and that stands for having an eye on the horizon. I think one of the challenges for law firm leaders at this time is to be able to balance the long-term interests of your people and your organization with the short-term demands of running a legal organization and the pressures that you're experiencing as a result of COVID-19. And that's not necessarily easy either. We all know that good leaders do keep an eye on the horizon, on the long-term future of their organizations. I think 5 years is probably too long a time horizon now. When we get events like COVID-19, some people refer to it as a black swan event. It comes completely out of the blue, takes us unawares. We can feel unprepared. And as a result of that, we're scrambling on the back foot, fighting fires and dealing with emergencies. And I guess maybe one of the lessons we have to learn from this is, are we going to be prepared for either a secondary outbreak or indeed another black swan or unexpected event that could affect us either personally, collectively, or indeed our industry as a whole? So we need to take on board all those risk factors as we move forward. But I think we also need to, as leaders, be cool, calm, and collected. I think if we're able to give our people a sense of clarity about forward, even if it is just in the short term, clarity does bring certainty, and with certainty it generates confidence, and that is an outcome that I think all law firm leaders are really looking for at this particular time. So I've covered some of the trends pre-COVID. They won't go away, they're still with us. I've also discussed briefly some of the pressures that have been caused as a result of COVID-19 and how some law firms in this neck of the woods responded very well, I have to say, to some of those pressures and challenges. And lastly, I've talked, using the acronym COURAGE, of some of the challenges that are being posed for law firm leaders all around the world, I'm sure in Mexico as well, as a result of the trends and the recent developments in the past couple of months. As Alex's opening slide said, this is a time of great opportunity. And I will, if I can, before opening it up for questions and handing back to Juan and Alex, leave you with a quote which I think is quite inspirational from Paul Pullman, who was the CEO of Unilever before he retired in 2019. Someone whom I've admired for his work in making businesses more sustainable. Someone who had an eye on the long-term future of not just his own organization, but also the world of business. And he said, the world we want will only be achieved when we choose action over indifference, courage over comfort, and solidarity over division. So on that note, I will, if I may, hand back to our hosts, and I will invite Alex or Juan to continue this discussion, and I'll try and answer any questions that may have been generated as a result of my comments the past 35 minutes or so.
Thank you, Simon. Great comments and insights. And let me get started with a question on how law firms leaders balance the short and the long-term decision-making process.
Not easy. I think that if law firms have a plan or any good at planning, typically those planning horizons are anywhere between 1 and 3 years. I think as a result of what's happened in the past couple of months, law firms will probably be revisiting their plans, operational and strategic plans for this year, and saying, well, which parts of that do we have to revisit? Do we have to rewrite, redesign, or whatever? Has it blown us off course completely, or can we still stay on the same path? And I would imagine that most law firm leaders will be wanting to stay on the same long-term strategic path, but that there is an added urgency in dealing with some of these short-term pressures that I've discussed. So I think as part of the decision making, I think there is a fine balance here between on the one hand, keeping the eye on the longer term future and not departing from that, while at the same time making sure that the short term pressures and needs of the organization are actually dealt with. That requires, I think, collaboration amongst all team members and understanding of both management and also all the legal professionals working in the organization, that there has been an emergency. We have to all rally around together and deal with it. It's not just the responsibility of the law firm leaders to do that. And I think if there's transparency around those issues, people are open in their discussions about it, and I think if law firm leaders are honest about the situation, it removes some of the anxiety that I'm sure that many people working in organizations may be feeling about the short-term future. Is my job safe? What does this mean for me? Are we going to be going back to the office? Am I going to have an office to work in the future, or will I be expected to work from home? So I think in the short term, that clarity is going to be needed. And I think that is the priority at the moment for short-term leaders. But the point I wanted to make, Juan, was don't let that be at the expense of navigating a long-term future. So keep an eye on that long-term, the long-term journey, if you like, as well. I hope that partly answers the question. I have you on mute,
yep.
Juan.
Sorry. Thank you. We have another question from the audience. Which values do you think that will be the top ones for the legal industry, law firms and general counsel, that they should focus more in this new business reality that we're going to be facing?
I don't think that they're probably going to be any different than they were before. Insofar as they are genuine and real, those firms that have taken the time to articulate their values, their principles, what they are prepared to stand by, what governs their behavior or decision making, I'd say stick with those as you have done in the past. I mean, one only has to visit a few law firm websites, and words like integrity and professionalism and care are words that appear. I would say that the values that are built around the welfare of people are probably the priority. We have a Maori proverb here in New Zealand, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. I hope I've got that right, which is effectively, there is nothing more important in life than the people, the people, the people. And so whatever decisions we do make, I think that a central value in our decision making has to be the welfare, not just of our business from a financial viability point of view, but from the viability of people who make the business happen, and from the viability of our clients who have obviously, many of their businesses may have folded. They're under a huge emotional stress at the moment as well. I think empathy, therefore, is probably one of those leading values. Having empathy with people and trying to better understand what is of concern to them at the moment. Excellent.
Related to one of the aspects that you comment about the decrease on demand, salaries going down or bonuses being affected. From your conversations and your advice to law firms all over the place, what is the best way to adjust to the new cost structure, to that new reality that everybody needs to respond to the doing more with less, or to the cost pressures that the clients will be putting in front of the law firms?
I think there's a couple of things. I think firstly, purely from a financial point of view, a firm that is looking to cut costs can do that in a number of ways. It may be that there are some fixed costs that they can't do anything about, but there may be some variable costs in terms of, say, for example, the cost of accommodation, the office, if they're able to negotiate a better lease with their landlords. It may be that there's some rent relief for a temporary period that can help. Then trimming those variable costs can obviously be of great help. In terms of salaries and in terms of bonuses, I indicated that firms are looking at reducing payouts on that basis. I know that some firms in the UK have introduced furlough, so people have been laid off for a period of time on limited pay. Some firms in this country have got their team members working at 80% capacity, so a 4-day week, which is actually, turns out that it's actually been very beneficial for productivity, and that is another discussion about the desirability of the 4-day week, something that the government in this country is actually looking at introducing across the board, and there is plenty of evidence as shown in Andrew Barnes's excellent book, The 4-Day Week, that people who are working a 4-day week are in fact more productive and in a better state of mind than having to go to an office 5 days a week just to be seen to be putting in the hours. To answer the question there in terms of costs, I think everyone bears a degree of responsibility here, but particularly the leaders of a law firm in terms of reducing their amount of pay if cash is really at a premium. I think the second thing is that I mentioned that the pipeline is looking a little, thin for some firms going forward. This is a great opportunity to redeploy some staff who might otherwise be used to normally just dealing with cases or matters as they arise, to say, hey, this is a chance to get good at business development or to do a little bit of research that you might not have done in the past. So I think emphasizing an investment of time into generating work in 2, 3, or 4 months' time is going to be very worthwhile. And I think that's another way that can alleviate the pressure on legal organizations when it comes to finances in the future.
And in that same reference, Simon, probably as a last question, you mentioned in the past that there's been some trends or analysis going on about the new requirements for office space, or the new changes or new expectations. I don't know if it's too early to determine if it's something on a long term, but certainly we have heard that discussion even before COVID as a redesign of the law firm related to the comments that you made. But how do you see this? How do you see this in New Zealand, Australia, in the advice that you provide to law firms in Europe? Are they considering that as a coming discussion topic or not really?
Yeah, I think it is a great topic for discussion, and I think that we've seen evidence in recent years of new business models opening up in Europe, also throughout Australia as well. And I find that a lot of the innovative business models are taking place amongst some of the smaller and more boutique firms, rather than the traditional established institutionalized type law firms that tend to be quite conservative in the way that they run themselves. But I think that there is more discussion now about the benefits of working from home. We know there are some law firms there that have very little by way of bricks and mortar, that many of their lawyers operate from home or from their clients' place of business. That business model works very well for some of those new law firms, because they say that it enables their lawyers to really focus on the needs of clients rather than having to get involved in the politics of coming to an office, dealing with meetings, etc., etc. Now, I also take on board the other side of that argument, is that there are a lot of people for whom work represents life. They like going to a place of business. They like the friendships that they develop with their colleagues, and they like gathering around in the morning and having a cup of coffee and sharing stories about what they did at the weekend. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next few months, or indeed years, how many law firms or legal organizations take up the idea of their people working more from home. And I think the arguments that are advanced by the proponents of the 4-day week are very strong, and they're supported by evidence that suggests that certainly productivity can increase, morale can increase, and so can team engagement. And it's a win-win for everybody. So I think there will be more discussion on that topic in this space in weeks, months, and years to come.
Excellent, thank you. And while I ask Alex to show the rest of the slides, Anything that you would like to share about, tell us a little bit of what you do in terms of the events. So you're very active in seminars and offsites for different teams, organizations. Tell us a little bit so we can get the benefit of knowing what's going on the other side of the world in terms of these consulting and team building exercises that you provide.
Well, in terms of what I do?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess my work is a mixture. Again, I've had to adapt and change like everyone else in the world the past few weeks. I was supposed to have been speaking at a number of conferences overseas in Europe and also in Thailand in April and in May. As a result of COVID-19, that didn't happen. And so increasingly, I find that the dialogue that I'm having with lawyers is using a communication tool like Zoom. Having discussions with lawyers. Often it's simply sharing ideas, mentoring a few clients who are looking for an independent set of eyes, if you like. Some of the work that I typically get involved with, and I'm sure the more face-to-face contacts will resume as business returns to normality over here, but things like partner retreats when partners go away for a social weekend to either plan or to discuss issues of either strategic or operational importance, then occasionally I get the invitation to go and help facilitate those discussions and contribute some of the thoughts and ideas that I've shared with you today. So those are some of the things that I've been involved with, and since COVID-19 I've started a series of webinars, a bit like you and Alex have done, called Law Chat. You can find details on my website on the legal button, and every month I spend half an hour talking to a luminary from the legal sector. We had Mitch Kowalski from Canada last week. 2 weeks ago rather, and I'm looking forward to a panel of 3 very dynamic and innovative women lawyers from Australia on the 11th of June, New Zealand, Australia time. That will be the 10th of June in North America. Tune in, it's half an hour, and there'll be lots of great discussion and lots of really good ideas from those women.
Excellent. Well, thank you, and all the best in your activities, and you get back to normal or the new normal. And it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that we'll be in contact and connecting again for other events that we put together. So again, Simon, thank you. Thanks so much for your time, and have a wonderful weekend.
Juan, thank you for the invitation. I look forward to welcoming you to New Zealand at some stage, but for now, gracias and buenas noches.
Muchas gracias, Alex. Can you hear us? Let's just wait a second if Alex is with us. No, he's not having. So we just wanted to, again, thank you very much. We had a few slides for just to close the conference, but we'll skip that. And again, wish you all the very best. Stay safe. Stay put for our next events. And Simon, thank you. A pleasure having you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.